Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Today's video, I'm going to be comparing only the Trump or Triumph cards of 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 decks. The Tarot of Paris, the Tarot of Vieville, the Dodal, the Flemish Tarot, otherwise known as the Vandenborre Bacchus Tarot, and then a Swiss deck by Sullivan Hissman's the TdM Hautot tarot deck. So it's a bit of a mix, right? We only have one deck that we would consider a TdM, a full TdM. But I think it would be interesting. I think I have them in chronological order. The first deck, which I'm putting earliest, is the Anonymous Tarot Paris. I don't know if it's the earliest, but my insights and my guesses tell me maybe it is. The Vieville, followed by the Dodal, followed by the Flemish Tarot, the Vandenborre, and then the TdM Hautot tarot deck last. And I have a couple decks for each. I have one that was put out by Grimaud for the tarot, the Anonymous Tarot the Anonymous Tarot of Paris, excuse me. And then I have one that was put out by the Italian Museum. This one is a good one that I like to use during classes because it clarifies, the Anonymous Tarot of Paris is confusing to see, and they did a nice job, the Italian Museum, of clarifying some of the imagery of what we're seeing. For the Tarot Vieville, I'm using the Joseph Peterson rendition. I have 2 versions of the Dodal that I'm referencing, the Artisan Tarot, and I like using Artisan Tarot's decks when I do readings because I'm a reader. That's what I do for a living. And they're clear, and they are easy to photograph and film. However, they're not always, they're not facsimile decks. And so as another deck to compare it to, which is also not a facsimile deck, I've used for another point of comparison for the Dodal, one created in unison between Shel David and Justin Michael. Some of you know both of them. And for the Flemish Tarot, the Vandenborre, I'm using the, it's distributed by Carta Mundi, Turnholt, Belgium, and US Game Systems, Inc. It's this one. And then the TdM Hautot, I'm using Tarot Sheet Revival, because I think they're the only publisher of this deck that I'm aware of. Before I flip the camera and get into this, because I think these are a really interesting mix of cards for comparison, I do want to let you know that next Saturday, today is Saturday, April Fool's Day. Oh, I think today's April Fool's. Happy April Fool's. I know, it's cool. It's cool. I didn't remember it consciously. And next Saturday will be the 8th. And I'll be the guest lecturer over at Artisan Tarot. Now, the lecture that will be presented is a lecture that I did a couple of years ago for them. So it's kind of a encore presentation. So for those of you who never caught it or didn't see it, I am particularly proud of that particular lecture. It's a good lecture. And if you can catch it, I'd appreciate it. Now, if I were really clever, I'd put it above here or someplace on the screen, but I'm not very clever. And so I'll include the link for you to sign up down below. It'll be the first thing I do, so you'll see it for sure. And I'd appreciate it if you could join us. Now, it will be an encore presentation, which means I already did it. However, I'll be available for comments, and conversation during the, after the lecture is over. I'll be available for that. And I'll be happy to meet some of you, and talk to some of you that I chat with here, but, we'll actually be able to talk to each other or chat with each other in real time. So that might be very nice. So without saying anything else, let me flip the camera and turn the camera on the cards, because that's what you're really here for. So happy Fool's Day, and of course the first card that I'm presenting for each of these decks is the Fool card. Now it might not necessarily be number 0 or have any number, right, in any of these cards. I think with one we have it numbered as 22. 2 of them is numbered actually 22, but the others are open for interpretation, having no number on them. 3 of the 5 of these Fool cards have the image of a fool being carried by the Fool. So we have it in the Anonymous Tarot of Paris. We have it in the Vieville. He's not looking at the image, but we have a representation of the Fool's face on the end of his satchel stick. We have it. We do not have it on the Dodal. We do not have it on the Vandenborre, but we do have it again on the Swiss Hautot, which is interesting, right? So we know when we see these kinds of things, it comes from someplace. Now these individual decks are separated, perhaps by 200 years. I don't have exact dates. I just know, that the Tarot of Paris happened sometimes in the 1600s, as with the Vieville, probably circa 1650. We know that Dodal is 1701. And, these two, the Flemish and the Swiss, later in the late 1700s. But remember that the Swiss, the Swiss border is not that far from Italy. And since the deck is Italian, these images of the Fool looking at himself came from someplace. And for those of you, and Richard, if you're watching, I think I already directed you to this, and others of you who are interested, this book is awesome. Now, it's a book, I believe, that was written in the 1500s regarding the tarot. And it's been masterfully translated and edited with commentary by Ross Sinclair Caldwell, Thierry Dupalis, and Marco Ponzi. Now, it's got an Italian, the original Italian, and it's, I believe, 2 discourses that are presented here. And so we have the Italian on the left side and then the English on the right side. And the English, I think the story of the Fool having that kind of imagery on the Fool card begins on page 15. And it goes on for a few pages, and it's really super interesting. Now, I'm not going to I'm not going to ruin it for you guys, and I'm not going to ruin it for them, otherwise you wouldn't buy their book. But if you can get their book, I would, because it's really, really, really interesting. And it, these guys are, of course, art historians that, I'm like an armchair historian. I love tarot. I have dedicated my life to looking at the cards and reading as much as I can, but the material I read has been written by other people. These guys, are guys that have gone to, they've held original tarot decks, and they've uncovered stuff, and they translate stuff so we can understand it. So, they're well above my pay grade. I'm just a tarot nerd and a tarot geek who has a very strong interest in tarot and learning. And I think I understand quite a bit about things, but I'm constantly learning, and I'm learning much And you know, I'd like to pay homage to the individuals who do so much research. Okay, so I already mentioned that there is a source, you know, for when we see the image of the fool on his own stick, right? Now, let's look at something else. We see a feline creature. Now, we don't see it in the Tarot of Paris. We don't see it, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. We do see it in the Vieville. In fact, it has almost like a yellow mane. So it almost, you know, it could be seen as a glitch of ink. That is maybe a mistake, but it could be that it's a mane, you know. Now, the artisan group, we don't have the mane in the Dodal, in either Dodal version. So that, you know, color of yellow was not, you know, transferred onto these decks. The Vandenborre, it looks more canine, I think, than feline. Oh, it's in my hand. And in this one again looks more feline, doesn't it? Because it's got the long mane. And it almost looks like a lion. It's just interesting. It's so interesting to me to see. Okay. Now, being the next card, the Bateleur, right, or the Magician card, is also discussed at length in the book I just referenced. And according to the book, this individual would have been recognized as an innkeeper. We don't see, here he is again in the Swiss deck. Now, we don't see, gets confusing when I have so many cards here. We don't see here he is here in the Dodal. We do not see a consistency among these cards. Oh, I'm sorry. And here is the Bateleur of the Anonymous Tarot of Paris. It does seem like there's some kind of game happening at the table. And we see a dog. Now, the dog is not like in the Italian decks, in some of the Italian decks. You know, if there's an animal, it appears in the Magician card. It doesn't appear in the Fool card. And with this Anonymous Tarot of Paris, we see it in the Magician card also, which is why I tend to personally think that this deck is earlier than the Vieville or the Noble. I could be wrong. I don't have an exact date for this, but and there has been exciting development. It is believed to be a distinct possibility that there's been a deck that was discovered recently, and I don't know the circumstances. They're not being shared. A TdM, a full TdM, having been created in 1639. So keep posted on that. Certainly if it becomes available, I'm going to buy it, even if I have to hawk something, you know, to get it. I will be getting it if it becomes available. Okay, so for the number 2 card, we do have the female Pope. She has a key in the Tarot of Paris. She does have a crown, and it does appear to be triple tiered, or 2.5 anyway. In the Vieville, she appears to be holding a book. I don't see keys. There's a book in the Tarot of Paris. In the Dodal, we have a book. But then we notice something quite different when it comes to the Flemish and the French, excuse me, and the Swiss. We have the Capitaine Français, or the Spanish captain, who is a theatrical individual, a buffoon, an exaggerated character. So there is another reference to theater, which I didn't say specifically, but the reference I made here to the Fool and the Magician that is talked about here, it also, there were plays that were referencing the Fool and the Magician in the tarot deck. Okay, so we have the Empress. She has different shoes, which is interesting. You know, a lot of times we think, oh, it must be an anomaly or a mistake. And I think sometimes things are. But other times they could be references that we no longer understand, but they actually meant something. And we see that the Empress does not have a religious crown. You know, she has more of a secular crown. We see it in the Dodal. It's also interesting with these decks to see which way the characters look. You know, the Empress looks this, you know, toward our left in the Anonymous Tarot Paris. In the Vieville, she is like the Justice card of some cards, right? She's looking forward directly. In the Dodal, she's sitting forward, but she glances to our right. In the Flemish Tarot, she faces forward, in common with the other deck where she faced forward, which I think was the Vieville. And in the Hautot, very similar, right? She looks forward. Now notice that in the Hautot, or the Adam C. Hautot deck, the number is different. The number 3 and 4 cards were switched, but I'm presenting the female Empress in the same order as the other cards. And let's take a look, go back a little bit and just look at the direction that the Fool faces in these other decks. Paris goes to our left. Vieville to our left. Sorry. The Dodal to our right. The Vandenborre to our left, as is the Hautot to our left. So the only one that is not in character, you know, facing in the same direction is the Dodal, which I think is interesting. Okay, moving on to the Emperor of the Anonymous Tarot Paris. He's standing, he's not seated, and he's looking to our right. In the Vieville, He's seated with the characteristic 4 configuration of his legs. And he's facing to the left as he is in the Dodal. As he is in the Vandenborre, and as he is in the Hautot. The Pope, we have the triple-tiered crown, a religious crown. We have reference to the stigmata. We have the keys. We have an interesting sphinx-like creature at the foot of the Pope. He glances to our left. The Pope of the Vieville glances somewhat to the right, and here we have his acolytes, which we don't have in the Anonymous Tarot of Paris, and we don't see reference to the stigmata on his hands. In the Dodal, we see the acolytes. We do see reference to the stigmata on his gloves. And in the Flemish and in the Swiss, we see Bacchus. And so I've discussed this many times in other videos that the religious cards, number 2 and number 5, were eliminated completely for more secular imagery and no reference to religious features. Although, you know, Bacchus, I think Dionysus was a god, wasn't he? But, you know, it wasn't one that would have been a competitor for whoever was the emperor of the time, whoever was the secular ruler of the time. So although there may have been a reference to, you know, a god or, you know, of antiquity, he wasn't a threat really to the powers that be. Now the Lover card of the Tarot of Paris, we see a couple being, it appears, somewhat intimate with one another. A couple who probably knows each other. And we have Cupid. And in the Vieville, it looks more like some type of betrothal or promise or decision-making between a gentleman and 2 ladies. I seem not to have the Lover card of the Shell David deck. I must have gotten it out of order. In the Vandenborre, we have similar, as we do in the Hautot. And only one is Cupid blindfolded. He's not blindfolded in the Anonymous Tarot Paris, nor in the Vieville, nor in the Flemish and Swiss decks. Only in the Dodal. Okay, moving on to the Chariot, number 7. We see a reference to swans pulling the chariot. I'm putting them in the common order. You know, this might have been numbered 8 in the Vieville, but I'm putting it in number 7. So we see, you know, what we do see in the type 1 style of Tarot of Marseille, right? The scalloped, you know, canopy edge of the chariot, which we see in the Dodal. And we see a charioteer with horse, a single horse, in each of the last 2 decks, the Flemish and the Swiss. Justice is blindfolded in the Tarot of Paris and has 2 faces, like the reference to Janus or Janus. There is a sword and there is a scale, which is imbalanced. In the Vieville, we no longer have the blindfold, but she still has her sword and her scale. As we see in the Dodal. And it's interesting because in the Flemish and Swiss, because justice is a virtue, they're more clearly referenced as wings, especially in the Hautot, right? But here it's a little bit ambiguous in the Dodal, you know, maybe the individual didn't quite know, so made it kind of be chair-like and wing-like at the same time. What did we have in the Vieville? Same, a little ambiguous, more wing-like than chair-like. And nothing like that on the Anonymous Tarot of Paris. Okay. We have the Hermit. Now, in the Anonymous Tarot of Paris, we have a gentleman walking. He's barefoot, right? He looks like he's walking on a path from a cave or some kind of tunnel. He's got, maybe those are prayer beads in his hand. He's got something else in his other hand. He's an elderly gentleman, and we know that because he's got gray hair. He's going to our left. In the Vieville, he's an elderly gentleman. He's walking to our right. In the Dodal, to the left. And you see when modern day publishers get their hands on a deck, you know, they make artistic decisions. You know, maybe they make commonly, green and green, but they might pick different greens and different blues. And these two, the gentleman walks towards our right. Now here he has some kind of book, right? Or something else if it's not a book. He doesn't have a lantern or a sundial or anything like that. Nor does he here. And here I don't even think he has a cane, a walking stick, as he does in the others. And although here he's a blonde, he does have a gray beard. Okay, we have the Wheel of Fortune. Let me find the wheel. I must have put it in the wrong order. Let me get it. Okay, found it. Here's the Wheel of the Vieville. And look at how, it's kind of confusing what we're looking at. It's even probably more confusing in the Vieville than it is in the Tarot of Paris. Of course, this was a cleaned up version, that made it a little more clear, but still. In the Dodal. And in the Flemish and the Swiss deck. Now, in the Flemish and Swiss, it looks like the wheel is turning clockwise. Let's see about in these other decks. In the Dodal, it looks like it's going counterclockwise. In the Vieville, clockwise. And in the Paris, clockwise. Okay, here we have fortitude. Which is also a virtue. I think it is a virtue. We have flowing scarves, but not wings. I guess it's not a cardinal, or, you know, it's not a virtue, but it's a good quality to have. Here, this looks more like a gentleman than a woman. In the Tarot of Paris, it's more of a feminine woman, you know, feminine person. Let's see, in the Dodal, it's a feminine person for export. And in the Flemish and Swiss, definitely seems to be more masculine. Okay, now the hanged one is also usually pretty interesting because sometimes the printer who did it, or the publisher, understood that the source was a hanged individual punished, you know, for the crime of treason or thievery, or, you know, something like that. And also the reason he was awake is that sometimes these images in Italy served as humiliation, like posters, like for wanted, you know, kind of dead or alive. And the reason that they were awake in these images is because you had to identify them, because if they were at large, it was like, we're looking for this guy, you know, and this is going to be his fate. So we have the hanged one in the Anonymous Tarot Paris, properly being hung, as it appeared in the Italian decks. But in the Vieville, something got lost in translation. Some people will say that this was intended, you know, but if you know, the origin source is an Italian, you know, wanted poster of an individual who is guilty of a crime and is going to be punished for the crime. And he's awake because we need to be able to recognize him, right? But something gets lost in translation, or maybe the publisher knew that it needed to be this way, but something happened. The individual printing at the printing press got confused or whatever and did it, you know, didn't do it properly. Or, who knows, maybe it was a deliberate thing. Could have been, you know, something that the publisher decided to print it upright just as protest, or who knows. We may never know the truth. But properly, the reference would have been a hanged individual, a person guilty of a crime. And see, in the Flemish and in the Swiss, we again have the numbers 12 and 12, but upright, with the words written properly. And here, he's not even hanging by the foot, he's hanging by the head. As an afterthought, it almost seems like they drilled something into his skull. Now, he doesn't look awake, does he? And look how confusing, if these are fingers behind them, look how confusing. His hands, you know, it almost looks like his arms are going into some kind of pocket, right? But, you know, I guess it's behind him. So that it must have been, if it is representation of fingers hanging behind him, right? which would have happened if his body was broken in a certain way. Must have been excruciatingly painful. And the way the arms fell must have been dreadful. We see it here in the Vieville. And in the Anonymous Tarot of Paris, his hands are free. Yeah, so in all of them except the Tarot of Paris, we have the finger tips behind him. Okay, death. We have the scythe. We have a flowing garment. We have the number 13, and we have the name. We don't always see the name on the death card. We have the number 13, no name. Flowing garment, the scythe. No flowing garment, the scythe, no name. And in the Swiss, or the Flemish and the Swiss, we see the name and the number, and a scythe. So the scythe appears, I think, in all of the cards, in every one of them. And let's check out their direction. All but the Dodal walk to our left. Okay, Temperance. So we see one vessel here, coming down. This looks like a vessel of fire and smoke. Isn't that interesting? And we have one vessel pouring into another in the Vieville. She's got a staff. We know that this was printed in reverse because the word, right, is in reverse. Sol fama, I think that means only fame. In the Dodal. Clearly, she's pouring it into two vessels. And let's see what we got here. In the Flemish and the Swiss, we have the words written properly, to be read properly. And we have a similarity with the Vieville, don't we? With the way that it's poured and with the staff of something in her left hand. The hand to our right. Okay, cruising along to the devil. And let's see, all the devils are going this way, but the Dodal who faces us. And his body might be going this way, but his face is looking that way. So he doesn't have minions, but he's got chains. He's got some kind of pitchfork. He's got bird-like feet. He's got a tail. I guess maybe a little bit of a Krampus thing going on. He's got the wings of a bat. He's got his tongue sticking out, as he does here. You know, the peculiar bird-like feet. Now here he's got faces in his knees and his belly and his shoulder, or his chest. A tail. Interesting. But here he has minions in the Dodal. He's got minions. So, you know, it's really interesting how in all, except for maybe the Dodal, there is a similarity, even with the Tarot of Paris, you know. right? And this is why I like to look at decks. You know, I'm not the most exciting individual on the planet, but I do have a lot of decks, and I do like to take them out and look at them. I hope you do too. If you're here with me this long, I guess you do. So thank you for that. So here we have a card, Le Foudre. It's either thunder and lightning or thunder. I think it means thunder, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. It's either thunder or lightning. I think it's thunder though. So we see a very chaotic scenery, you know. Something has happened that is very chaotic and dangerous. People taking shelter. And there's like a big bird, right? We see what looks like the eye and the face of some kind of creature. Maybe, I don't know if that's a bird. But then we have like what looks like the tooth and the jaw, and then somebody descending into it. Wow. And the Tarot of Paris is awesome. You know, it's got so many cool images. So we have the Vieville. Again, no tower that we do see in the Dodal, right? We do see the tower in the Dodal. Individuals falling. Like a chaotic scene, for sure. Not so chaotic here in the Vieville. And again, in the Flemish and Swiss, we see a tree as we did in the Vieville, called the same thing. We have hints that, you know, lightning is being struck. We do see a shepherd with his flock in all three of these. The star card. We see an astronomer with his caliper and the star in the sky. We see an astronomer with his calipers and the star in the sky, a building, perhaps a scientific building. But when we get to the Dodal, we have the reference to Aquarius, and I have spoken on the constellation of Aquarius many times for the choice for the star card. And for the Flemish and the Swiss, the astronomer with his calipers, a scientific building that we saw in the Vieville, right? Or some type of institute, right? And then the star in the sky. And we have the Moon card. Now, in the Tarot of Paris, it's the idea of nighttime. We have a young man serenading a woman, looking through a window in the evening. We have other things going on, but it seems to be more of a concept, right? And in the Vieville, although it doesn't make sense for a woman to be doing needle threading, you know, in the evening, it seems to be something that you would need light for. However, it's possible that it got confused and it was supposed to be for another numbered card, like the Sun card, but it was used for the Moon instead. In the Dodal, as we see in Tarot of Marseille decks, we have a different image altogether. And I've spoken about where I think the source for the Moon card came from in the TdM, and I have it on my blog also. And I'll post that link below because it's a really interesting article. And I'm kind of proud of, you know, where I think it might have come from. I've never read it anywhere. I don't, as far as I know, no one else has said it, you know. I have seen a video where I had participated in something where somebody gave me credit for having figured that out, or not that I figured it out, because it might not be true, but that I made that observation. So I'll link that down below because it might be pretty interesting for you to see if you haven't already read my article. And again, with 18, we have somebody threading in the evening. Now, it could be that, you know, thread work was considered woman's work, and then the woman is associated with the moon. So it's possible it was a deliberate choice, making, you know, doing work like this, which you would normally think would happen in the daytime, happen in the evening, because it's associated with the moon, which is associated with womanhood. Okay, 20, we have the sun, and we have a most interesting representation of what looks to be another type of hominid. Astonishing a woman, surprising a woman, holding something up. Maybe it's a mirror, I don't know, with the sun in the sky. But then here we have a young individual on a horse with a banner. Here we have, in the Dodal, we have the youths in a stone-walled garden, or, you know, an area that is walled off. And in, like, the Vieville, with the Flemish and the Swiss decks, we have an individual on a horse with the sun above. And I think we saw it in the Solobusca, I think. I can be wrong, but I think it, you know, there is reference to it in the Solobusca. Okay, 20, Judgment. The angel blowing his horn, and individuals coming from their graves, blowing his horn to announce that the time has come. We see it in the Vieville. We see it in the Dodal. And in both the Flemish and the Swiss deck. So this is one card. The representation across all five is similar. And the World card. I love the World card of the Tarot of Paris, which is more in keeping with the Italian decks, where there's a little round, you know, map of a city, right? But the Vieville, we see the figure in the mandala with the four evangelists, as we see in the Dodal. But in the Flemish and in the Swiss, again, we have this great imagery. So I hope you guys thought this was interesting. And actually, this video was suggested by one of my viewers, and I apologize, I don't remember which one, but you know who you are if you're still watching. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And please do tune in, sign up for my lecture next week at with Artisan Tarot. I'll provide the link below for sure, and I'll also provide the link for the article I wrote on my blog in where I think that the TdM Moon card derived from, which I think is very interesting. And, you know, as far as I know, I'm the only one who, or I'm the first person that I'm aware of that made that connection. So hopefully you'll read it and think it's interesting and agree with me. Until next time, friends, peace and stay well.